I spent 6 years working 2 jobs while finishing my degree at night. My sister Claire never understood why I didn't just ask our parents for money like she did. She had everything handed to her, tuition, rent, even her wedding, while I paid for every textbook myself. When I finally graduated with honors, my parents insisted on throwing a party. I should have known Claire would find a way to make it about her, but I never imagined she would do it in front of 200 people. The party was held in my parents' backyard, string lights hanging between the trees, tables covered in white linen. Everyone I had ever known seemed to be there. Old professors, co-workers, family friends, even the dean of my program, who my advisor had personally invited. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to my thesis defense because I couldn't afford anything new. Claire arrived late, dressed like she was the one being celebrated, and immediately started working the room, laughing loudly enough that people turned to look at her instead of me. When it came time for toasts, my father handed Claire the microphone by mistake, thinking she wanted to say something kind about me. She smiled sweetly at first, thanking everyone for coming, and then she turned to me with a look I'd seen my whole life, the one right before she said something designed to hurt. "I just want everyone to know," she said, raising her glass, "that some people in this family work themselves half to death for degrees that don't even guarantee a real job. At least I know how to actually succeed." The backyard went silent. I felt my face burn as 200 people turned to stare at me, waiting to see how I would react. My mother opened her mouth to say something, but Claire wasn't finished. "I'm not trying to be mean," she continued, though her tone said otherwise. "I just think it's sad when someone spends their whole 20s chasing something that was never going to pay off. I got my house at 24 without needing a fancy piece of paper." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, and I wanted to disappear. I thought about walking away, about letting the humiliation pass quietly like I always had. But before I could move, I heard a chair scrape against the patio stones. Dean Whitfield, the head of my entire graduate program, stood up from her seat near the front. She was not someone who spoke without purpose, and the whole yard seemed to sense it, falling into an even deeper silence than before. She set down her wine glass, straightened her blazer, and looked directly at Claire with an expression I will never forget. "Since you brought up degrees not guaranteeing anything," the dean said calmly, "I think everyone here should actually know what your sister accomplished." She turned to face the crowd, gesturing toward me. This young woman didn't just finish a program. She published research in her 3rd year that our department is still building on. She was offered a position at a research lab before she even defended her thesis. I flew in tonight specifically to tell her that, because I wanted her family to hear it from me directly. Gasps moved through the crowd like a wave. My mother's hand flew to her chest, and my father turned pale, looking at Claire like he was seeing her for the first time. Claire's smug expression cracked, her mouth opening and closing without any words coming out. The dean wasn't finished, though. "I also happen to know," she added, her voice sharper now, "that the research lab reached out because they read a case study she wrote about financial hardship and academic persistence. It's being used to help other students get funding they wouldn't otherwise receive." The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, but not aimed at me anymore. Claire tried to laugh it off, saying something about not meaning any harm, but her voice wavered and nobody was buying it. My aunt, who had always been close to Claire, quietly set down her plate and walked over to stand beside me instead. One by one, people began doing the same, drifting away from Claire's side of the yard until she was standing almost alone near the drink table, her glass still raised from her toast. My father finally spoke, his voice low but firm enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You've spent years telling this family that hard work doesn't matter," he said to Claire, "and tonight you try to prove it in front of everyone who actually watched her do it." Claire opened her mouth to argue, but he held up a hand. "Not tonight. This isn't your moment, and it was never supposed to be." I had never heard him speak to her that way before, and something in his tone told me things between them were never going to be the same. The dean walked over to me afterward and placed a hand on my shoulder, telling me quietly that the lab wanted me to start within the month, with a salary I hadn't dared to hope for. She told the crowd to raise their glasses again, this time for the right reason, and the backyard erupted into applause that felt like it lasted forever. I looked over at Claire, expecting to feel triumphant, but instead I just felt tired, the way you feel after carrying something heavy for far too long and finally setting it down. 3 weeks later, I started the research position, moving into a small apartment near the lab with my own name on the lease for the first time in my life. Claire tried calling twice, leaving voicemails that started with apologies and ended with excuses, but I let them sit unanswered for a while. My parents told me she'd stop bringing up money or degrees at family dinners, and that alone felt like more of a victory than anything said at that party. Some lessons, it turns out, only stick once the whole room has watched them happen.